Hey guys, what's up? It's Stacking Chairs, the youth ministry podcast all about serving in youth ministry, whether it be youth group or youth camp, whatever God has you serving in, that's what we're talking about. I'm one of your hosts, Josh Paul Hamus. I'm joined by my fellow host and good friend,
Kyle Gray. Josh, this is the second time we have tried to do this thing, or we are doing this thing remote. Yeah. And so I'm excited. It gives us a chance to kind of broaden our horizons a little bit.
Well, and also broaden the geographical horizon because you're up in New York.
Yeah.
And I'm here in Florida still.
Absolutely. And so while I'm not in camp, I am up with the camps guys, and literally three of them just walked in the door and gave me a really strange looking face. But yeah, man, up here, we're setting the theme for summer. We're setting the theme for winter camp, and just watching God do a lot of incredible things. And I tell you what, Josh, one of the most exciting things for me when I get around other Word of Life camp guys is to know while we may execute things differently, we've got the same direction and the same vision, the same heartbeat. So
yeah, no, and that's cool. So explain a little bit more about, like, you guys are meeting up there. You said you're discussing a theme, like kind of explain to our listeners what that entails.
Yeah. So probably about 9 years ago, 8.5, 9 years ago, we decided, myself, the director of the island, the director of the ranch at the time, who actually is back to being the director of the ranch, all decided, hey, let's have one same theme. Again, we're going to execute it in different ways, but we want to have one same theme in the way that we can develop our focus, our direction, and something that kind of unites all of us. Because listen, let's be honest, all of us are smarter than one of us. Oh yeah. And so kind of coming together and kind of putting that. And so we get together twice a year where we have these conversations, and then we evaluate, and then we reevaluate. And so I'm up here, and we really try to make sure that it's not so much like genre focused, like cowboys, space, knights, whatever, that it washes out the spiritual theme. And at the same time, making that spiritual theme fun and engaging and exciting is a fun thing to do. So
it's kind of funny. I feel like we're like in an interview right now instead of like a regular podcast. Doesn't it feel more like an interview? Yeah. Like I'm like
it is
interviewing you for a job.
So Josh, I'm just letting you know, we just don't see the future of you and that.
Yeah, this is my time. Bye.
Yeah. I hate to tell you, Josh, but it's my boss just walked in the door and he's staring at me. But,
this episode, I mean, we always talk about during camp how, hey guys, you're going to hear a lot of things, you're going to see a lot of things because it's camp time.
Which we don't see a lot of. Yeah. But now
when it's because it's a camp meeting. Yep. That's why.
So you may hear the hesitation in my voice, but Josh, where can they see the hesitation on my face?
If you want to see the hesitation on Kyle's face, you can check us out at Word of Life Fellowship on the YouTube channel. And then also on our Instagram and everything else here at Stacking Chairs Pod. It is funny to watch. I see your eyes. They keep scanning as people walk into the room. Yeah.
And funny. As a people person, this is dangerous. Literally there's glass all around me. Oh, my word. And I'm like, I should have faced the other way. So Josh, here's what I thought. I thought the topic that we could talk about today kind of goes along the lines with what me and my team and the teams up here are focused on, but just kind of giving a little bit of a heartbeat of why we do what we do in pouring into the next generation. Yeah. And so I'm just going to kick it off if that's cool with you.
Yeah, please.
So our founding director, Jack Wyrtzen, used to say this all the time. It is the responsibility of every generation to reach their generation for the Lord Jesus Christ. And I love the heartbeat and the fact that Jack all those years ago understood if it ends with me, it's got a date. Yeah. If it doesn't end with me and it can flow to the next person, it's a movement. Yeah. And Jack was very big on making sure that it wasn't about a man. It wasn't about a monument. It wasn't about, any specific. At the same time, we've had some great people that have stood up and have been a part of some incredible things, but starting a movement with young people, and let's be honest, Josh, that can be really tough when you are really good at what you do.
Yeah, and it's hard to pass those reins off to the next group of people. But so Harry Ballback, who was co-founder, is that the official term? Yeah. Co-founder of Word of Life. passed away a couple of years ago. So I got a chance to meet him. Jack passed away in 1996. So I never got a chance to meet him. But Harry would always say, and I always found it interesting, is people would ask him like, hey, what do you think about the music that they're doing or the games they're doing? And I remember being there during one of those conversations, and he said, if I like it, then it's the wrong like thing. Like they shouldn't be doing it. I'm the wrong audience.
Right.
And it's interesting because the message has always stayed the same. And we've used that in some of our advertising as well, is our message has always stayed the same. Our goal has stayed the same, the gospel to the youth of this generation, but our methods have changed, which is part of that giving it to the next generation. Wouldn't you say?
Right. And, oh no, absolutely. And that's where it's, I think so many ministries have struggled, and even churches have struggled, and even people have struggled with the idea of it's okay for somebody to come along and to do it differently than I did it.
Yeah.
And that's really tough, especially when you have been successful at what you've been doing and the way that you've been doing it, and there's a little bit of fear in it, what if they don't end up where I want to go? I mean, think about it. I remember one of our executive directors getting up and him saying, Princeton University used to be a biblical university that was designed to train pastors. Yeah. Yale used to train pastors. They had biblical foundations, and it was built into the formation of who they were. And if you think Princeton and Yale today, you don't think pastors, you don't think ministry people.
Goodness no.
So somewhere along the line, they changed their core values, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know that's not what.
Well, I was gonna say, it's never overnight. Like that's not a shift that happens immediately. And that's one thing that we've held to at Word of Life. And I think I applaud, that I really enjoy, is the focus on youth and the focus on the gospel, and the things that we stand on have never changed. But like we said, like the methods have changed, and I like that we've passed it on to the next group of people. But yeah, like I said, it's never happened. It doesn't happen overnight. It's always over the course of years, which I'm sure we can see in our ministries, in our churches as well. Wouldn't you say?
No, absolutely. And that's where there's this, if you are not looking for the next person to train up, to hand off, you either have to hold on to it into your dying breath, or you've got to reach a point where you just throw somebody the reins and go make it work. Yeah. Both of those, I think you could go, well, that's an extreme. No, but that happens all the time. Yeah. No, how many times do we see churches fall apart because the previous guy or the next guy says, well, I don't want to do that because that's what the previous guy did. Well, is what the previous guy did wrong? Yeah. Is what the previous guy did bad? And so I don't know.
Yeah. So what's it look like then in your opinion, to carry on and pass on that torch then? I mean, we talk about passing it on to the next guy. So like, you're having a ministry inside of a church and a youth ministry. Passing it on to the next person means planning meetings and being all together and carrying someone along discipleship. I know, planning meetings. I brought it up intentionally.
Weird.
But what about the key part of that phrase that I've always it's always funny because I've heard some people say it's the responsibility of every generation to reach the next generation. And then I've heard it's the responsibility of every generation to reach their generation. And I like both. So we're just going to assume that it's both for this moment. But how do you train up the next generation to reach their generation? Maybe it's actually that is the actual phrase. So the kids in our youth ministries, how do we train them up to reach their generation and give them the passion? Because I mean, at least me personally, I feel like I had portions of that passion at a younger age. But my true passion of reaching people with the gospel probably didn't come in until my mid-20s, when I really started to understand the grace that had been given to me and kind of, sanctification through what, as I'm sanctified and set apart, I've understood it differently. And then I've gained more of a passion. How do you instill that passion in a group of teenagers who they're just kind of figuring out how to live?
Well, and let me ask another question. How do you instill the passion to preach in a group of people that have no desire to preach?
I don't know.
Like if you say, man, every year I want to train up a young man to be able to know how to preach the gospel. Well, what if you have a year where you have no young guys that want to preach the gospel?
Yeah.
And so again, I think if you and I are not intentional about growing whoever it is we have, and part of growing is giving them enough rope to be able to run in their own direction, but it's not giving them endless rope that they can run in any direction. If that makes sense. Like, for instance, when I train up my program guys or my funny guys up on the stage, they understand they've got a pretty wide room to run around in, but there's a room for them to run around in. And whenever we step across that line and out of that room, I try to have an intentional, focused, not putting them down for something that they did wrong, but they did it in a way that I don't want them to do that. And kind of interacting with them in that spot. Well, now let's talk about the ministry. It's more important to do that. It's more important to be training up. I had a guy one time say, why in the world are you, as the leader of that ministry, always having to be the quarterback on the field throwing the touchdown play? And so, you know what? I like having my quarterback out there. And when my quarterback can't be there, and the sub, the second string guy steps in, I'm not as excited. But sometimes, I've never given that second string guy an opportunity to do it. So no wonder why he doesn't do it very well. No wonder why he doesn't do it effectively and efficiently. And so, I think we've got to be intentional about training. I think we got to be intentional about identifying. I think we have to be intentional about allowing them to not do it as well. And that's okay.
Yeah. Well, and especially when it comes to we talk about the ministry side and the practical side of getting things done and messing things up, but let's talk about actually what's it look like to evangelize? Sharing the gospel. There's many aspects of sharing the good news of Christ, but you need to use your words too. You have to share with people what it means to have a relationship with God through Jesus Christ. And it reminds me, when we were talking about this before, I told you I had a story, and it reminds me of, we did an event with our youth kids, and we went out to a park, and the goal was just to go around the park and give people tracts and try and start conversations. Right. So I take a group of 5 or 6 teenagers from our youth group, and the one kid, he's so excited to share the gospel with these people. And he's to the point that he's trying to flag down cars and stepping out into the road and stuff to do it, to share the gospel with them. He is going out of his way to there's some poor woman who is walking alone on a trail, who was about to go, I think just coming out of the woods on a trail. And he's trying to run up to her and stuff. Yeah. And he's so excited. Well, I struggled because I was do I help him understand that hey, you can't jump out in front of cars, and you can't, you can't run up to some person who's walking by themselves who might feel like you're just running up at them. They don't know who you are. It might be intimidating.
Aggressive evangelism.
Exactly. So there was that side where I was like, hey, you need to and trying to teach him that social aspect. But then he came back to me and he said, how are they going to know unless I tell them? And you're stopping me from telling them. And so I was faced with this weird predicament. And I think the landing I came with, which is it's kind of funny, in that moment, I hold that, hey, you gotta be careful. You can't jump out in front of a car. There are ways to keep yourself safe and to not make people feel like you're about to attack them or something. But there was a vigor that I lacked in that moment, where I was like, hey, if they don't hear it, that's fine. We're just out here, just kind of let it be what it is. And the other night, I was standing at a cell phone lot waiting to pick someone up from the airport. And I was talking to this lady. My wife and I were talking to her. She's telling stories about how she works as a paramedic. And I felt this tug on my heart saying, you need to share the gospel with her. And I immediately was like, I need to find an excuse to leave. Jonah running, all the way to Tarshish kind of deal. And I kept thinking, I don't need to. Well, we've been talking to her for 45 minutes at that point. And I said, you know what? She's talking about how people die in front of her every single day, almost. And I'm sitting here and I have truth to share with her. And I'm just going to sit here and just say oh yeah, that's terrible, man, to have no hope, and just leave it at that. And so, And so I did. And I thought of the Benners, which the Benners. If you know Word of Life, the Benners. They have a passion for sharing the gospel. And then I thought of this kid in my youth group, and I said, and I started opening up the conversation. I was like, "Have you considered the claims of Christ?" And talking about hope and try. And I didn't get to present the whole gospel to her, because people are sometimes shut down. They want to leave then. And I tried to, but I got out at least. I was like, I challenge you. Like you say that you deal with this all the time. But have you considered like, what's beyond this life? Is there purpose beyond this life? Is there hope beyond this life? And I talked about a friend of mine who has been told that he doesn't have very long to live. But he's looking at that. He's looking at the end of his life with hope. And he's still scared, and he's still working through all those things, but he has hope, and we're going to see him again one day, renewed. But she doesn't have that hope. And anyway, that's a very long story to say. The thing that's been sitting on my heart is I look at this kid in youth group, and he says, "Hey, I want to share the gospel with people, and I don't care what it takes or what I look like doing it. Everyone needs to hear this."
Absolutely.
So
I had a guy recently ask a question. He said, "Hey, youth pastors, if your kids shared the gospel the way that you share the gospel, not in the event-based way that you do it." You see, I think a lot of kids think the plan to reach their friends for Christ is their youth group.
Bring them to church.
A lot of kids, I think that students feel like, hey, the plan to reach my friends for Christ is waiting for Reverb, waiting for these evangelistic events. Now, that's a part of it. Sure. I don't think there's anything wrong with that being a part of it, but these students are God's plan to reach their friends for Christ.
Yeah.
And you've got to help a kid get there. Sure. You may have to rein a kid in and go, okay, hey, let's take all that passion and let's direct it. But youth pastors, if your kids shared Christ the way that you share Christ, would they affect their town? Would they affect their schools? Yeah. And Josh, honestly, it's really hard to be intentional about ministry sometimes when you're the ministry leader. It's a whole lot easier to just do it yourself. It's a whole lot easier to just do an event. It's a whole lot easier to, instead of going, no, you know what? It's my responsibility to look for opportunities everywhere I go, in the same way that I challenge these kids to look for opportunities everywhere they go. But so I would say this. I would say, I think every year, probably even twice a year, but I think every year we need to be in youth ministries. We need to be equipping our kids to share the gospel. Yeah. I think we need to be equipping our kids, whether that's to speak the gospel at an event and you're working with them. I think we need to be equipping our kids to share the gospel on a personal level. There's a lot of incredible ministries that are out there. Dare to Share. We've got a great relationship with them. You guys have heard us talk about them before. Life in 6 Words app, an incredible ministry. But not only training them, I think we need to do ministry events for them to be able to be the ones doing that. Oh, like a training almost, like a training event. Yeah, do a training event, but actually go out and share the gospel like you took. Like you took your kids to do. Yeah, we started doing in youth group, Matt, which you guys, if you've been listening for a long time, Matt Noble is the youth pastor that I work with. Come on, Matt Noble, come and be on the podcast. We should get him on the podcast. Yeah, the problem is we record during the week. He's got a job, whatever. No. He's bivocational, man. He puts in the time. So, then he has a real job. Okay. No, guys, listen, as you're listening, Kyle didn't mean that. We all know both a real job. So yeah, you've just alienated our entire audience. Are you going to go public apology now? Off. Yeah. They just said, sorry, done. Yeah, no more show. Cool. Cool. So Matt started doing, he preaches maybe 1 week and then maybe 2 weeks, maybe a third week. And then he does like a deep dive study. And so what we're doing is he's teaching them hermeneutics. Like, how do you read the Bible? How do you study the Bible? Open up this website, Blue Letter. You ever use Blue Letter Bible? Blue Letter Bible? Oh, yeah. I'd never used it. I'd never heard of it before. BlueLetterBible.org. Yeah. I'd never heard of it before. So it's a fantastic resource. Highly recommend. I'm sure many of you are already using it. But we open that up. Everyone has a binder with notes, and we go through and we say like any interesting phrases. Hey, what are some of these words? What do they mean? What are they in the original Greek? What are they in context? And he goes through and does all of that. Well, take that same kind of mindset and fix that into, hey, how are you going to share the gospel? How are you going to understand your faith entirely? Because there's a lot of kids who come in
and we've talked about this on the show before. My the pastor at my church says, VeggieTales Christianity is a Christianity that can easily just be wiped away because it just fits into your normal life of what everyone else is doing. But not a radical Christianity, but like a Christianity that saves has a bit of more than that. There's the side that you're willing to give your life for this. Your entire life is staked upon it. It's not something that's just kind of a wayside. And so we have to help kids understand that they might have to one day give their life for this. And it's not something simple and small.
Well, and I think students today, not that no other generation has wanted this, but students today want a mission. Students today want a cause to live for.
Absolutely.
And what greater cause than not just having them be about you sharing the gospel, but them sharing the gospel? Are you praying for your schools? Are you praying for specific people in their schools? Are you dedicating time? You see, we make time for the things that matter to us.
Yeah.
And so in your youth night, are you doing one of the things that Dare to Share does, which I think is incredible, is they do that whole take 5 for the cause. Are you taking at least 5 minutes at every youth meeting and saying, hey, let's pray for people specifically. Let's pray for our schools specifically. Are you training your kids and then are you sending them out? Or are you just expecting them to hear the gospel and to hear you talk about the gospel and go and do it? And Josh, we all know it happens by modeling, not preaching.
Yeah.
It happens by giving opportunity. So
yeah, I was going to say, like, you have to train, you have to preach, you have to teach and do all those things, but you're absolutely right. I mean, what's the phrase? They'll do what you do, not what you say, something like that.
Yeah. Or you get what you inspect, not what you expect.
Yeah. But I mean, I think of even my daughter. I mean, I can tell my daughter all day long, to not like get upset and get angry at something. But when I'm working on something around the house and I get angry and I exclaim and I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I did blah, blah, blah. And I get all upset. And she I've seen her mimic that before where, she'll get upset about something and grumble and complain. And I didn't teach her how to do that. She just picked up on it. Well, we have to have that same kind of passion. I have a passion in my heart to be upset if I can't get this screw to go in the right spot or whatever. I'm building something and I'm frustrated. But that same kind of passion, I want to pass that kind of passion on for the gospel, sharing the gospel to my daughter and also the kids in my youth group.
Right. And so again, it's passing on that passion. It's laying out that example. And so here's what I thought, Josh, because I know it's a little shorter, but today we tried to be real focused. And so Josh, it's time for us to move into
small group.
And Josh, here's what I thought we'd do for a small group. Instead of us sharing stories, I thought we would just ask a couple questions.
Okay.
So my question would be, how are you equipping? Not how should you be equipping, but how are you currently equipping your kids with the gospel? I think we'd ask, hey, what am I doing right now?
Yeah.
How am I equipping my kids to share the gospel? And then number 2, in what ways am I giving my kids opportunities to share the gospel? And I think if a youth pastor looked at that, maybe take a step back and say, okay, let's look at my year. Let's look at my schedule. Let's look at my calendar and ask those questions. How and where am I equipping my kids to share the gospel? Okay, great. Now, how and where am I giving my kids opportunities to share the gospel?
Yeah.
And you may realize, oh my goodness, when I look at this, I'm just expecting them to have me be the one to share the gospel. I'm just expecting them to have me be the one that's taking. And again, I think it would be eye-opening to say, okay, how am I equipping my kids and how am I giving them opportunity to do that? So
no, absolutely. Yeah, I know you have people coming in and out because you definitely have another meeting coming up at 2:00, which is in 5 minutes. So
very short.
Yeah, it's a very short episode, guys, but we wanted to give you a challenge. We want you to see the impact and the importance of sharing the gospel, but also preparing the next generation. And that means preparing people to take up the reins from you, but it also means preparing the kids in your youth group. Kyle, any final thoughts as we're wrapping up here?
Well, again, I think I would just take it back to that whole idea that you brought across of I get what I model, not what I ask for. And so am I modeling the example of my kids to not only care about the gospel? I would be surprised if the majority of our kids in our youth group said, I don't care about the gospel. They care about the gospel. They care about the fact that their friends are going to hell. but do they have the knowledge of how to set up that conversation or how to move that conversation?
Yeah.
To your point with that lady at the airport, in the cell phone lot, like, you know, all of us get there and go, I know I need to turn this conversation to sharing the gospel.
Yeah.
I just don't know how to. So again, how are we equipping our kids to be able to do that?
Check out,
so they feel successful.
Yeah, check out Dare to Share's resources in that, because they have some great resources in that. I mean, that's their whole bread and butter.
Yeah, some great discussion starter questions. So
yeah,
cool.
Well, good. Thank you, Kyle.
Hey guys, thank you so much, Josh. I appreciate you working with me in my crazy remote schedule. But
we're gonna be doing this a couple more times this semester.
Absolutely.
But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. Check us out everywhere. Stacking Chairs Pod on all our social media. Stacking Chairs Pod at wol.org. You can email us, ask us questions, guys. Don't forget we have special a pursuit camp for young adults coming up. Weekend 6 of Pursuit Camp. There's gonna be more information on Stacking Chairs Pod. Check out the group. I think that's everything I have to pitch. The only thing left is to say,
we have to make sure that we stack those chairs.